Nice. The 2022 World Championship. Taking a look at the top three. Now, before we dive in, before we get officially started, first, Mark Brown, my brother, welcome.
Hey, good to be here, my friend.
Mike Davis, world-class speaking coach, TEDx coach. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for bringing me in, Darren. Love to do this with you guys every year. This is fun.
Nice. So, so first quick disclaimer before we dive in. Here's a disclaimer. Look, the results are the results. We're not here. We're not going by the judges' form. We're here from decades of world-class coaching for the audience to win. What did we like? What were some, Mark, David Brooks did a program, Magic Moments. What were some of the magic moments? And let's show them to you to dissect them. If you're watching this, whether you're watching it live with us, cool, thank you for being here, or watching the replay, take notes, because we're going to give some specific time codes. So each of the speeches, I've taken literally specific time codes. Mark and Mike use Udemy. They do that as well. So you're going to get the insights from this. And, Mark, Mike, it took me 2-3 hours last night to go through specifically step by step. So the results were the results. We're not here to say we disagree, we agree. It's not about that. It's about what can we learn from this? What did they do right? And if they asked us for coaching, what would we have recommended that maybe they could have done better? Now, disclaimer, Mark pipe in on this, or Mike, if I was to watch my own speech, I would have some critiquing to do as well.
Same here.
You're in the moment. It's the World Championship. There's pressure on. So make no mistake, mine was not perfect. I had a great connection with the audience. The connection was awesome. However, it was not perfect. There were things I would change. So I just want to say that right up front. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, and what we offer today is not going to be directed at the three winners. It's really, hopefully, educational for everyone who is here, those who are alive, those who will hear the podcast later on. But what we share will be our observations of things we may have done poorly, because I won this title 27 years ago, and I've learned so much since then. So the goal is for all of us to learn and benefit from these critiques.
Mike Davis, your thoughts before we dive in.
They finished 1, 2, and 3. That's pretty good. We're just, again, it's pointing out what they did well. As we always like to say at stage time, we're going to tell you what you did well, because if somebody doesn't point it out, you might stop doing it. And then how could you make it even better?
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
All right, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us, Mark. So, I don't know. I'm just so excited, and I'm excited about the notes. I went through it. I relived the whole experience. Mike Davis, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, we're going to jump right into an audience participation question. I'm going to show you a quick slide in the chat box. And unfortunately, if you're listening to this, you won't see, but we'll describe the picture in a moment. Tell us which one is more visually appealing to you on this slide. Is it the top? If you like the top picture better, and I'm not talking about the speaker per se, but just the whole image. If you like the top picture better, put a 1 in the chat box. If you like the second one, put a 2. Can you see those two pictures? Visually, which one do you find more appealing as an audience member? 1 or 2?
A lot of 2s coming in right now. I see 1. I see a couple of 1s, but 2s are dominant. Interesting.
Yes, and I can ask the question a little better. Which one do you feel more connected to, one or two? That's another way to ask it.
Better
Yes.
question.
Better question. Which one? Because they're both very handsome young men. That wasn't the question. We both know, we know that already. Which one grabs your attention and connects with you? When before the contest, it's the third year we've done the virtual, and this year was a hybrid situation. We just naturally think it's more of an advantage to be in person. Visually, we found, because of the way the camera was placed, it was an advantage to be online. Who would have thought?
Yeah, didn't see that one coming. So this is the first time, if you're listening to this is the first time it was a hybrid contest, meaning some of the contestants were virtual and some of the contestants were live. And the downside of being live is they locked the cameras down. They did not follow. There was no close-ups. You could not see the micro expressions on their face. Now, being there live, you have a different connection. It feels different. So look, there's advantages to both, but bottom line, if you couldn't be there, you did it virtual. If you could be there, you probably wanted to be there for all the love in the room. Mark?
You know what? I have not been in a virtual contest, but I can see why number 2 was the more prominent answer today, because if one thing I tell you, it appealed to me, was the visual sense of seeing the micro expressions on someone's face. But that was just my opinion of how those two images work. I do want to once again invite everyone to remember, when you put your comments in the chat, make sure in the little blue box too, it says to everyone, because some are coming only to hosts and panelists. We want everyone to enjoy what you have to say and to get the benefit of your thoughts as well. So please make sure you respond in your chat to everyone, not only to hosts and panelists. Darren?
Speaking of the chat box, we do have a question from Marion. How many judges were in person and how many were online? I believe they were all in the room.
No idea. No idea.
If anybody knows,
let's some virtual ones. But,
okay.
But I'm not sure. And and two quick things. So it was asked, I think it was Nazir asked, why are we only critiquing the top 3? Because only the top 3 are online that you can watch. Correct. And we wanted people to be able to go back. So be ready to take notes, whether you want to type it in or write it down, because we're going to give you specific time code. So we're going to show you some of the clips, but some of them we're just going to give you the time code as the example. So in that situation, we wanted Nazir, we wanted people to be able to go back and study and watch it, because that's important. Also, we can go deeper on 3 than we could if we did 8. So I would rather go deeper on 3 than surface level on 8. And sometimes in the past, that's what we've done. And I just think, anyway, I'm excited to go deep on these. And my last disclaimer, it's easier to critique than to craft.
It's a keeper right there.
It's easier to critique than to craft. It's easy for us, from our experience, to sit back and critique and be nitpicky than it is to craft it. So kudos to the top 3 for the work, the effort they did, the coaching they got, the many clubs they went to and tested it and tweaked it. So they have done hours. It's very easy for us to sit back and be, oh, this could have been better, you know. So anyway, Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah. Oh, by the way,
Alex, reverse order, 3, 2, 1.
Sure. Yeah. Alexandre did point out that half of the judges were virtual, and he should know he's one of the people we're evaluating today. So thank you, Alexandre.
Maybe we'll bring him up after.
Yeah, I'll jump in with some comments right away about Moss. The first thing that jumped out about him was that this is a likable, to me, he's a kid, so I'm going to say kid, likable young man. I mean, immediately has this huge smile on his face, even though the camera was far back. And I loved his suit. It's something different. It wasn't traditional. I didn't find it to be a distraction at all. So he came out, and what each of the 3 speakers did too is, because of the way the introduction went this year, you were to acknowledge the contest chair welcomed you. You thanked the speakers, thanked the chair, and then waited until she replied. Well, all 3 of our speakers did a fabulous job of using silence. They did not move forward until she acknowledged them, and they commanded the stage, whether virtually or in person. That was impressive, because so many people get the jitters. The nerves are already at a high level and they're jumping in, and they waited. And I thought that showed how they owned the stage right away.
Andy, why the English accent when being nitpicky? I don't know, Andy. Maybe you inspired me, but I think Patricia Fripp, because Patricia says specificity builds credibility. And if you're listening to this or you're not involved in Toastmasters this year, you're just getting some insights. What we're saying here is this is the first year that they required that you thank the contest master, and the contest master refers back to you so you know that you were heard. So this is also for the virtual people to make sure they're audible so that communication is going both ways before the speech begins. So that's a formality. The time does not start there.
Yeah. One of the aspects about Mas that I liked is he established his foundational phrase early. Behind every action, there's a story. Go find out. That was repeated at least 3 times. And that was the wisdom from his father. So that's what he needed. And it helped to change in the story arc where he undergoes a transformation that changed his perspective, in this case, on his mother and the relationship between them. So we saw an effective change from start to finish. Well, terrific humor in there. I love the heartless mother disorder at the 3:49 mark. By the way, we're going to try to timestamp our comments, so when you go back and watch this or listen to it, you'll know what part of the speech we're talking about. Go ahead.
Mike, just to clarify that one. So it's a comedy rule of 3. And he said he named 2 literal disorders, and then he created the third one, the disobedient disorder. Oh, you're talking about 3:45. That's when he did avoid, I eat. Yeah. Oh, the heartless mother disorder. So he established it, just FYI, he established that, creating disorders because he was studying psychology. So he established that, labeling people. His mother didn't like he was labeling people, and then he labels her. So it's a callback to earlier. Mike?
Yeah, and that was one of the points I struggled with a little bit, even watching Massa's speech a second time. I felt there were possibly 2 messages in here. It was his father when he talked about, let's see, what was behind every action, there's a story, go find it. But he also hit this label concept pretty hard. And there was some confusion there for me to say, which one of these does he want me to walk away with? Even though he did end at the 7:19 mark, he asked, are you labeling someone? I wasn't clear there, and I struggled a little bit with that.
Yeah. So I'm going to show a quick clip, and let me point out 2 things before I show this. So if you're taking notes, at 58 seconds, he does a great job establishing dad is on one side, mom is on the other. The person who is mean and tough is on one side of the stage, and dad who loves him and is nurturing is on the other side of the stage. I really like how he did that. On the same clip, here's what I didn't like. And Mark, and Mike, this is one of the things we teach is, if you're taking notes, characters don't make eye contact with the audience. A character only talks to the other character. So if you're talking to a young boy, the focus is here. They don't look around, because what you're implying, if you're looking around, is that the child, the person they're talking to, is moving, or them being disrespectful and looking away while they're talking to them. It's subtle. We're being picky. This is just one of the aspects we're teaching. So let me show this clip, and then you guys can piggyback on that. Whoops, that is not the right one. Live podcast. Sure, Darren.
That's all right.
All right, so I'm going to play it. This is at 44 seconds. So at 58 seconds, notice how he establishes the stage, but then notice at 1:32, the character is in dialogue but looking around. Check it out.
There are 2 gifts that unite us. And my mom once told me, stop crying and toughen up. Contest chair, friends, do you feel the contrast?
So he's talking about dad he established on one side and mom on the other. Now he's even doing this, which is great use of stage, great anchoring. But watch his eyes when he delivers dialogue.
Growing up, I wish that my tough mama was more like dad, loving and caring. She never gave me a hug, never said, "I love you." Instead,
So even the I love you, he's starting to look around.
she'd be rough and tough. You see, in 2012, I pursued a psychology degree. Tough mama disagreed. She said, "Son, better become a doctor."
So notice how son, he looks at the character and then he looks around. And here's where that loses emotional connection in the emotional connection. So that takes us out and almost confuses us. Mark or Mike, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. There were several times he seemed to begin a conversation with characters. Now, his dad was the most consistent. Dad almost always looked at him, and it was brilliant. He had the same posture, the same attitude. So dad's character was wonderfully established, both when he was downstairs and upstairs in the bedroom on the bed with him. Wonderful. But there were times his eyes would then go to the audience as if maybe he was concerned. I don't want to lose the audience by being in character. But our recommendation is, if you're having a conversation, have the conversation with the character, then come to the audience so we can see the result and the reaction and the emotion associated with that particular conversation between two characters.
Yeah, and that reminds of the other, and some of our members pointed out in the chat box, one of the keys to being in a hybrid environment is you can't forget there's a camera with an audience on the other end. And I didn't see ever making a point to talk to the camera. We love to see speakers do that, especially when they're making their key point. Step forward and look into that camera, even if it is at the back of the room, because now your virtual audience feels like, oh, you're talking to me. And I never got that sense. But also same with the dialogue. If you want people to feel like they're watching a scene, you can't look at the audience in order for them to experience that. It's contradictory, but watch a speaker who expertly does that. Comments here is the other characters back and forth and never does look at the camera until they make the point.
Nice. Yeah, we're so used to watching film and television. It's almost like watching a scene in a play or on a film. As the scene plays out, when the scene ends, then you can interact with the audience as well. And Michael, you mentioned the camera. I always say this. The camera, in this particular scenario, the camera is another individual in the room. And the hybrid meetings are becoming commonplace now. I had one earlier this year for an insurance company, and they had a camera in the back of the room, and happily a light to shine on the stage so I could be well lit for the camera. But I had to be very aware and conscious that the camera was there and deliberately address that camera at certain times. So yes, it's always wise to remember the camera is someone in the room. And in dialogue, have that conversation personally, and then come back to the audience and follow through. Darren?
All right, got another clip here. So at 4:07, if you're taking notes, he had a good rule of three where what I love about this rule of three, it's not just for a laugh. It's establishing his emotion and how he feels. He's avoiding his mom. So she does this, I avoid her. She does this, I avoid her. She offers me food, I eat it. Laugh, laugh, laugh. And then I avoid her. So it's the fact that he's avoiding her. Now, watch this. I think this is a huge opportunity where he could have really grabbed us and brought us in. And it's when he notices his mom crying. So I'll show you what he did and how I would have advised. Again, wrong share, Darren. Try it again. Take two. So if you're taking notes, this is at about 4:32.
Wait. My tough mama never cries. Anyway, in my room for half an hour, my dad knocked.
Okay, so it's a little before that. My bad.
Avoid. When she offered me my favorite food, I ate.
I like the smile,
Then
too.
I avoid. And after 3 weeks of avoiding her, one evening, I came home and was going up to my room. But I noticed that Mama was sitting in the living room. Mama's eyes had tears? Wait.
Okay, so in this situation, I would prefer he stop on the stairs and look. Wait. So he told us he noticed his mama crying. I would have suggested let us witness you noticing your mama crying and hear the internal dialogue. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's good, actually. Very often, the action that we take will reinforce the point we want to make. The action we take will reinforce the point we make. And as Darren says, if he's already halfway up the stairs and he goes, wait, is mom crying? Tough mama never cries. Well, okay. And then he goes up. So we see he gets a realization and he decides not to be concerned. He goes upstairs and then his dad comes and counsels him on what he should have done in response to his mom. And that was the moment where everything shifted.
Yeah, that's a key point. And Mark brings up the most important word there is moment. We preach this in stage time frequently. It's all about moments. That moment actually sets up another moment where he gets a shift in his whole interaction with his mother and their relationship. Darren, can you go to 6:10 and play that for about 15 seconds?
Yep.
You'll get close enough.
The moment on the stairs would set up what you're about to see.
Close enough. Here you go.
Listening and understanding helped me discover the story behind Mom's actions. See, Mama cared for me in the best ways that she knew how. Though her love was unconventional, it was unconditional.
No, stop there.
Great writing.
Her love was unconventional, but it was unconditional. Tweetable moment. That sums it up right there.
Yep.
One thought about that though. Darren, could you play that clip again just for a second? That's that piece where he delivers that beautiful bit of writing.
Yep. I think I know where you're going with this. I got the same thing written down.
For me in the best ways that she knew how. Though her love was unconventional, it was unconventional.
Right there.
Yeah.
My recommendation, a line like that, you hold your ground. You face your audience and you emote to them. The movement dilutes the message.
Yep. Don't
What do you
move
got there,
on
Darren?
key lines.
Yeah,
I
you
learned
don't.
it from you, Mark.
I appreciate that. We recommend you do not move on a key line. You stand your ground, establish a connection with that audience, and then let that line drop. And I always recommend a line like that. My line is put some air around it, a pause before, deliver the line, and then a pause after. Let that line sit there, let the audience feel it. So when you move, it's one distraction. When you don't pause before it, a second distraction. When you don't pause after it, it's as if you can blow by the line. I'm not saying he did, but for any presentation, any key line you establish in your presentation, put some air around it, stand your ground, and deliver it from that spot to give the audience a reason to key in on that line. Darren?
I also, here's what wasn't clear. I get it, but here's what I think would have been powerful is the fact that he never really clarifies that the reason she was crying is because he's been avoiding her.
Right.
Right.
It's implied, but I would love to hear, son, why are you avoiding me? Or just, that sets up the conversation. So I get it, but something like that I just think would be powerful. We don't hear her talk much, and I think that would have been a powerful clarifier that was the avoidance was the reason she was crying.
And why I think that would be good, Darren, my last thought on that particular piece is this. Moss was very skillful at establishing certain movements as well. When Dad spoke, he had a certain posture. And when Moss said, he used this just gesture, Aaron, gesture for you. That movement, a few times to show he wasn't concerned. And when he saw mom crying, he also went, and went upstairs. But having him understand now why she was crying, it magnifies the contrast between the depth of her love, him avoiding her, and his nonchalance, almost dismissive, and contrast also gives us a clearer picture of what's happening. There was a comment in the chat by Colin when he said he considered a triad a good time for a set of three, with unconditional being the third. I'm going to disagree with you, Colin, on the conditional, unconditional. I think those two are in such direct contrast, adding a third could muddy the water and muddle the impact. So from my perspective, the unconditional and unconventional was a perfect contrast in that particular scenario. Now, we love our triads, but for me, personally, in that particular case, I wouldn't recommend a triad, but that's my opinion. Only my opinion there, right?
Agree wholeheartedly, Mark. We have to be careful with all of these rules we've established in speaking. Is we don't have to use three every time. And when we're talking about a foundational idea, the shorter and the more rhythmic, the better. It would dilute it if we added anything to it.
Which is why I always say, we must be, when we are selective, we will be effective. The key is to select when is appropriate to do a triad. When do I use a pair? When do I use contrast? When do I use dialogue? When do I use narration? When we are selective, we will be effective. When we are selective, we'll be effective. I do have one comment on the establishment of the two gifts. If I'm going too far ahead, Darren, you can stop me right now. But I will confess, I was fooled early on in the speech. At the very beginning, when Mas began, he talked about two gifts, title. My brain is prepared to hear them. His dad told him there are two gifts that unite us, but he doesn't tell us what those two gifts are. So when Tough Mama says, don't stop crying, toughen up, and he asks, do I see the contrast? I will confess I didn't, because I had nothing to contrast toughen up against. I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but I thought I would hear what those two gifts were. And because he didn't state them, I said, okay, I'm going to get them soon enough. And I got two gifts soon enough. My dad was loving and caring. So for the whole speech, my brain went, Dad, loving and caring are the two gifts. Mom is tough mama, quit crying, toughen up. And then he reveals, no, it's a listening ear and a loving heart. So I was under the wrong impression of what those two gifts were for half of the speech for two reasons. One, they weren't fully established when he first mentioned two gifts that unite us. And two, he told about loving and caring twice. So I made the assumption those were the two gifts. Again, my Jamaican brain is going here, so perhaps no one else saw it that way, but that was where I was led. Now, when he did establish a listening ear and a caring heart are the gifts that unite us, and his movement was synchronous with what he said at the beginning, I totally got that. But this time around, early on, I was misled regarding what those two gifts were.
I had the same thing, Mark. At 59 seconds, he asked the question, do you feel the contrast? And I put no.
Yeah, against what?
I didn't question. And he rushed through it. He didn't let us even think about it. And that's very typical. A lot of folks do it. And we're always telling speakers, slow it down, ask your question, let us think about it.
And I had at 6:40, I did love the happy ending. I love that. It's like a Disney movie, Mark. But I still would have loved to have heard his mother be a part of that rather than just her hugging.
Yeah.
So again, dialogue, in my opinion, missing. I love the message behind every action. There's a story, you know, and here's a bonus too. It tied into the convention theme this year.
Oh,
which was we're all storytellers.
All right.
So I love the message. I didn't love the last words linger. His last words were, there are two gifts that unite us. I would have rather he reiterated the main message and then asked us to listen and the other one.
Yes, a listening ear and a loving heart.
Listen with a loving heart, and you will be united, or be united. But you must listen. You must have a loving heart. Something like that, rather than there are two gifts that unite us. I thought that was, it could have been stronger. Anything else?
Real quick, one last thought regarding use of stage, which might be helpful to us. Early on, he established that he went in 2012 to study psychology. I didn't bookmark or didn't timestamp that particular statement, but at 3:10, and he moved to his right, audience left, which we see as the past in time. Cool, I love that. However, when you say 2012, I began to study. Some people are going to do math or maths. Okay, 2012, it was 10 years ago. Was he 18, 19, 20? So he's 32 years old, maybe, I don't know. Then later at 3:10, he says, at 19, I had my first great heartbreak. But he moves to his right, his left, our stage right. He's going to the past, but he's moving to the future. Visually, we see the past to our left, that's audience left, speaker right. We see future, audience right, speaker left. He went from going to college to study psychology to being 19 years old at the very opposite end of the stage. He had no place else to go. So visually, it was a bit confusing as far as timelines go. The established rule of thumb is, as a presenter, when you go to your past, you move to your right, audience left. You progress to your future, you go along to your left, audience right. So we see time passing as an audience from left to right.
What was the sound that he said when he said like meh? It wasn't meh, but what was the
like an
eh?
Yeah,
I didn't know how to spell that. So what I liked is the brevity, and we got it, and the emotion behind it. It was very brief, very succinct, and we understood his mindset. That's awesome. At 5 minutes and 18 seconds, when he finally agrees with his dad to go down and talk to his mom, he says, "Fine, I'll try." Now, this is being super specific and picky, but I think he could have just done fine. I don't think he needed "I'll try," because we're trying to conserve words. There's nothing wrong with it. It works. It's the same attitude, but I just think fine. And then he went down, and it would have saved him a couple words. Any other thoughts on the two gifts?
Last thought regarding staging. Visually, mom is downstairs in the living room crying, and Mas and dad are upstairs on his bed getting with counsel in the same physical space on stage. If you look at 5:22 on the video, around 5:22, he's having this talk with his dad in the same place that mom was crying. As we present, let's think about establishing physical locations on the stage that'll make it very clear to the audience what's taking place, who's there. And as far as possible, if you want to reserve a certain spot for a certain person, a certain activity, that's great. But think about how we can use stage effectively. We did a podcast on stageology several months ago. Go back to our podcast and look at that particular episode. We talk in more detail about blocking and setting the scenes on stage for clarity for the audience. I do want to respond to what Mary's voice said about culturally. Some cultures read right to left and up and down. That is true. That is true. I use that thought within the confines of an English-speaking contest with Toastmasters, a North American organization, realizing that we have to make concessions in a case like that. We're in an Asian country where the culture was different. Yes, I would certainly stress that there. So I should have clarified that within the confines of the contest, in this particular case, it is wise to apply that standard. That's all. Thank you.
All right, Mike, anything else on Moss?
No, and it was pointed out, and this is for all the in-person presenters. They were limited. They couldn't use the stage the way you normally would with a moving camera or with not having to think about a camera. So that was a restriction they all had to deal with.
We shrunk the stage.
Yes.
On to number 2. All right.
Now, disclaimer, He's here.
That's right.
But I'd like to give the feedback, but after that, maybe we'll bring him up and ask a couple quick questions. He's a stage time member. We've worked with him. He's gone through our courses and programs. So I looked at, I had all good stuff as opposed to critique because we've taught him and trained him. Now he did the work. And he did this masterfully. So I'll just jump in since I'm yapping anyway. At 41 seconds, I love this. He said, "If I were there with you in Nashville, you would see me on the huge screen. Why am I here and not there?" This was such a great setup for what he was going to say. The reason he wasn't there is part of what his speech was about. Loved that. And it also, I love the question, and it evokes curiosity. Yeah, why aren't you there? But guess what? If I'm thinking that, I'm engaged, I'm connected. So I love that. And then at 55 seconds, one word, tradition. And it's what he said and how he said that in one word. And then obviously this is, well, obvious to some of us, this is a line from Fiddler on the Roof, an old USA movie, US movie in the United States. However, he then goes right after that, and if you don't know the reference, and he goes on and explains it. So now, even if you weren't aware of it, now you're on the same page. Guys?
Darren, when you said it's from the movie, was it the word tradition from the movie?
Well, Fiddler on the Roof. Yeah, what he said.
Yes.
Tradition.
Well, yes. Well, actually, he said that I can tell you in one word. Tradition. That is a direct line from the film. The words that I can tell you in one word. Those who are familiar with the movie will say, "Oh, nicely done. I wrote down here, Alexandre, bien joué, well played." Okay, but he used it in a way that he could that he could then return to his own story and connect with us. But I want to go back because at 51 seconds, I asked a question, but he kept speaking a little too quickly. You know, why am I not here? I'll give you the answer. Well, if we're wondering something, give us time in our own minds to answer the question you asked. We say this all the time in our sessions, in our workshops, in our webinars. Answer the question in your own mind and give yourself enough, maybe a 2 or 3 heartbeat pause to give the audience time to respond to the question in their own minds before you then respond to them. We can be very nitpicky about this, and Alexandre knows this, but that was an early observation. I know he's done several things well, but that was one that kind of jumped at me because we've been talking about it for so long. So I'll leave that right there. Michael, any thoughts?
Alexandre immediately established the theme. We had no question where this was going, but he did it in such a way that we wanted to go along for the ride. And I used this word last night on our stage time call. It was a masterful use of the screen. That's where so many people have struggled. And I will give it to the last 2 world champions and Alexandre, who finished second, and last year's second place finisher, Nitai. They each used the virtual screen so effectively. Now, you should not do well in a contest just because you use the screen effectively. They each had a message that is memorable we take away. And Alexandre made it very easy for us. It's tradition, and he challenged us at the end. And there was so much humor in here, which is difficult to pull off in a virtual presentation. And yet it was there, and he was schooled enough to give us time to laugh, even though we weren't in the room with him.
I also love at 108, if you're taking notes, I love how clear it was when he just sets up the relatability to what the world's going through, what I'm going through, what you're going through, where he says, struggles with tradition and the changing world around him. So the main character, he's struggling with tradition and the changing world around him. Well, we're coming out of the pandemic. It's pretty much changing. So it became a very relatable theme, but he did such a great job of explaining the character and what's happening and how we can relate. I also love the writing at 1 minute and 22 seconds. My friends online and my friends on site. What a great way to do the yin and yang online, on site. Great writing.
Yeah, I want to go to his use of describing his family, his grandmother, his grandmama, and his aunt Christiane as the main ingredient in the coffee, which played right into the ingredients of the no-bake cake. It was an excellent use of creating a metaphor for each of the people and their role in his family. And the cake was a perfect metaphor for it. So he did a nice job with that. And now Denise pointed out something in the chat box. It's important. Not everybody loves just seeing the face and upper part of the body. Some people want to see more of the body. That's a personal choice. We're big fans of seeing the face because that's where you sell your message more than any other part of your physical being.
Nice.
And that is a challenge when you're virtual. We are accustomed to seeing television news reporters in a frame like Darren, Michael, you and I are all right now. The exception, of course, being the sportscaster who's going to show his screen or the meteorologist who's showing you the weather systems. We'll see their full bodies. But for the most part, we almost are accustomed to reporters and so on being in this particular frame. However, if as a presenter, you'll be using body movements, you'll be using props and other devices that will require a fuller use of your body, then you must then selectively decide what is most appropriate for your presentation, for your style, and for your manner. I will confess, I am hard pressed to try to imagine Darren LaCroix doing one of his illustrations in a little box on the screen, because Darren's very visual, very physical, and very active. Get over yourself. So it's hard to see Darren being Darren in this particular format. I'm curious to know down the road how that might work out for you, but that's it.
Well, and you also, I see varying opinions coming in. You also have to go with what you believe. If I believe being closer up is more effective, then I need to be closer up. I can't go against my own beliefs. If I believe being further away is more effective so they can see what I'm doing, then I need to do that. So we have to go with who we are, and you're not going to please everyone, but you got to go with your authentic belief yourself.
Definitely. I concur.
I loved his, describing his grandmama. Grandmama was humble, resilient, and the best cook in the world. His eye contact was amazing, and his audio was awesome, which is critical. If you're doing it from home, you've got to have good lighting, good microphone, and great eye contact. And it can't just be good enough. It has to be amazing. Mike?
Yeah. Also, I know this is a common refrain amongst the world champions back when you were all sitting together for the in-person contest, the death count. Alexandre did something beautifully. He lost 2 family members in this speech, but the way he did it, a very subtle hand movement where he just said, Christiane was no longer, I forget how he said it, but she was no longer with us. And then this is the first year without our main ingredient. He's already established grandmama is the main ingredient, and you just looked up. That was it. Didn't stay in it. It was just, that's how he established it. They're no longer with us and moved on. And that's a gift.
Well, along those lines, regarding staging, my congrats to Alexandre, because he established grandmama here, the main ingredient. He established Christiane's home here. And when he said that Christiane was leaving too soon, not only did we see her leave too soon, he lingered here, as if to say, farewell, hope I'll see you again. It was subtle, but it moved me when I saw how he did that, because that way we know, as you said, Darren, he has lost his aunt, but it's not done in a maudlin way to pull at our heartstrings and to gain any kind of sympathy. It's part of the story, and it certainly was well told. And again, regarding staging, establishing grandmama here and having Christiane there, and Pierre kind of had this lean to him, an attitude, a cynical attitude of who Pierre was wonderful. Someone commented about using accents for names. I think it was wonderful. And also, he used the phrase to describe the cake in the French word, and then said, "Oh, you need subtitles? Well, humorous."
Yes.
But he didn't have to abandon his French Canadian heritage for us to understand the names of the characters or why it was important. So that I thought was also very, very well done. And using that limited space so well, I thought was a nice touch. And I have to assume that took some work to plan and prepare and decide what's going to work best. Now, I did have a concern, which I shared with Alexandre earlier before the contest, about his tendency to lean to the side a bit when he was talking. Earlier, it seemed almost like this, and he and I talked about this, and he did adjust it. But there were times, I think for the most part appropriately, when he did that and leaned in well to the camera. To me, one of his most brilliant moments occurred in, let's see, where is it? One of his most brilliant moments occurred when he talked about getting Grandmama's recipe and having to establish it. It was at 3:44 in the video. Was the video there, Darren, real quickly?
Yes.
Let's go to about 3:40 in the video, and I'll show you what I really liked here because it seems so natural. It actually made me laugh. Go about 3:40. Right there, it's good.
Start with a chunk of butter. Chunk? What's this?
Right there. That just emphasized how befuddled he was. And his hands, I don't know if he rehearsed that, but that made me LOL, LOL, laugh out loud. Because here's why. It was not a part of a well-rehearsed, well-prepared speech. It was a man who was befuddled. He was stifled. How big is that? And that literally 2 seconds, I thought, that's natural. That's real. That's authentic. And the reason I said that, yes, am I praising Alexandre? Yes. But I also am aware very often we try so hard to deliver a speech. Sometimes our authentic vulnerability is cast aside at the expense of looking good on stage and being proper and correct every single time. That to me was just brilliant. So there you go.
Yeah, Mark, I wrote that down as reactions tell the story. You know, that is a classic.
Yeah.
His reactions are so sincere and so authentic. The story is told in the reaction to that.
Yeah.
That was not a gesture. And we have a lot of Toastmasters here. We don't like the word gestures here. And because it's prepackaged, it doesn't look authentic. That was totally, to Darren's word, a reaction. And that's why it works so well.
Yeah, I also had, so the subtitles joke, when he pronounces it in France and then says, "Would you like subtitles?" And just how he delivers that. That's at 2:02. I also loved at 2:13 when he leans in and it's almost like,
Yes.
just, are you with me? Are you, and that just makes you feel connected because he wasn't doing it robotically. It was like sincere. Like here's a line that if you were talking to him in person, he would lean in and kind of like psst, or whisper to you. So I loved that. Do you like it already? So I also love the character, Uncle Pierre, and I'm going to show a clip. Here's what I also want you to look at. His smirk. Smirk at 2:41. It's powerful and distinctive. And then I'm going to end it, Mark, on the reference that you had at 3:08 when he says, when Christian left us too soon. Mm-hmm. Watch the pause and him almost respectfully
saying goodbye. Yeah.
Say goodbye. So it's a little bit longer, but I want you to see the smirk, how it's powerful and distinctive, followed by a great pause. So that's 2:41. And then Christian is at 3:08.
My Uncle Pierre, the little brother, he was sure to tease her every time. Christian, you don't make it as good as Grandmama.
Look at this smirk. Come on. Jim Carrey level.
I wrote down Pierre appears cynical. 3 words. Continue.
If grandmama was the cookies, the main ingredient of the family, Christian was the coffee, full of energy and flavor. So we started to think that maybe our family would crumble when Christian left us too soon.
Bam. Those extra seconds were gold.
Now, here's the thing about writing. Forgive me, Michael, real
That's
quickly.
okay. That's all right.
Throughout the presentation, he talked about tradition holding the family together, right? Interesting. Mas mentioned uniting us, right? But the contrast to that, using the metaphor of cookies, was crumbling. I believe that was just very well written. And I don't believe the word crumble was chosen at random. Cookies crumble. That's how the cookie crumbles, the no-bake cake. I just thought the holding together and the crumbling were wonderfully chosen opposing ideas to reinforce the message. Michael?
Oh, absolutely. And it just occurred to me what Alexandre did brilliantly that most people would give a lot of backstory to. He never told us that Christian eventually became a really good cook. He put it into Pierre's words. It's not as good as Christian's. Christian has replaced grandma that fast. He didn't get in. It's a time contest, so you got to be efficient with your words. But I just thought that was a great way to now establish that Christian's no-bake cake was just as good as grandmama's.
And of course, it takes 12 years. And he'll say 12 years later. It took 12 years for Uncle Pierre to say, it tastes like childhood. And again, me being who I am, and I think it took him 12 years to perfect the recipe, but by then, the family was still staying together. And when he first realized, wait, who makes the cake? And he leaned in at that point because it was important to pause with the look of wonder. Well, I'll get the recipe, I'll do it myself. But the progression, the arc of the story, to me, was just well taken. And he allows us to let his Uncle Pierre tell us that after 12 years, he was able to perfect the cake, which he then offers to us in a very delightful way. He drops it, we don't see it, but he wants us to taste it. And I like the ending. After he says his farewell, takes a bite and goes, That was kind of cute. That was. So I do have
his version.
Yeah,
go ahead, his version of Darren walking off the stage and doing that. What I love about the moment you just described, Mark, where Pierre tells him it tastes like childhood, that sets up the moment of change, the shift.
That's the moment.
Alexandre. That's the
moment.
That's the setup moment.
Yeah. And the thing is, real quickly, Michael, you and I have always said this. There are moments in every presentation. If you're missing a moment, if you're missing a change in a character, if you're missing that, you're missing a main ingredient in your presentation.
So at 4:16, I love the character exchange between Pierre and Alexandre.
Yes.
At 4:41, he still ate more than his fair share. Very funny line. Like, yeah, you made fun of it, but you ate more than your share. And then, Mark, you mentioned this moment, but I think it's worth witnessing together when he said it tastes like childhood. So here's a guy who is like, no, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. But the words, it tastes like childhood, says so much. And then watch his reaction. I even wrote down, freaking brilliant.
We'll leave it in. Okay.
But see how his reaction, his almost like he can't believe he said this. What, did he really say that? Did he give me a comp? And just, it's beautiful.
Years after my first try, Pierre said something different. Alexandre, your cake, it tastes like childhood. What? It's just cake. Or is it? No.
Paul is as well.
I got choked up in that moment. because of what that meant, what he was saying. That was like a simple line, yet that bring Christian, Grandmama, and Pierre all into growing up. There is so much to that, man.
Well, Darren, you're saying emotion. Let's go to 6 minutes. I'll go to 6 minutes and 8 seconds, please. 6:08. Right there.
Will my family crumble? No. Because I know my cousins will be there to hold the torch, each one of them adding a special ingredient to our family's traditions.
Let's stop there. Alexandre, if you're still with us, please let me know if you had a burst of emotion in that moment. Because I felt something when you, OMG, yes.
OMG, yeah.
Your voice almost broke there. And yes, Kathy, you're right. His voice almost broke. And he says, my cousins were watching, and I know they'll be there. Man, you want to give me sweaty eyeballs, Alexandre? Don't do that, man. Come on. I'm too old for sweaty eyeballs, man. Come on. That was
emotional and great writing at 5:19. Reminder of those we loved and those we lost.
Loved and lost, yes.
Just
Terrific writing. Yeah.
great writing. And here's something I've never said before that he is the epitome of. He is a visual exclamation point.
Bring in Victor Borga.
Facial expressions. 544 tradition calls back. 650, my friends, what do you want to hold together? You know, bringing it back to us.
Now, Darren, I know you got all this good here, so I don't want to bring my downer at the last. So I'm going to ask a question before you finish your compliments, and it's this. I began to wonder, though, about the title. And here's why. Grandmama was the main ingredient. The title says the missing ingredient. But I was so filled when I saw the speech, I wondered what ingredient is really missing from this family. They've continued to hold together. They've maintained their tradition, even though they've loved and lost. So I wasn't clear, Alexandre, what the missing ingredient was. And maybe I'm the only one. But that was a question mark in my mind when I saw the presentation. I don't want to end on that, so I'm going to let Darren continue, unless you prefer to put a comment in, Alexandre, to clarify. That's where my Jamaican brain went.
Mike, I want to keep this brief, but Mike, why don't you bring Alexandre up? And while Mike does that, well, let me ask him permission, because his idea that he couldn't do was freaking brilliant as well.
Let him talk about that. Yeah, I agree.
I just want to make sure he's okay if I say it.
I'm trying to promote him.
Okay.
Okay. Says he'll be joining here. All right, here we go.
There he is.
Alexandre.
Hello.
Bonsoir, Alexandre. Ça va?
Oui, merci. How are you?
Oh, we are wonderful. Darren?
I hope you are happy with the critique.
This is awesome. You're finding things that I didn't even think about.
Nice. Are you okay if we share your brilliant idea, or would you like to share your
Let him
brilliant
share.
idea that you were
Oh,
not
yeah, of course.
you were not able to do?
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to share it?
Please.
Yes. Well, so it's not only an idea that I wanted to share, but the cake. So at the very ending of the speech, I say, would you like a piece? Here, grab it. And I have that visual fun with it. In reality, there was cake in Nashville. I found a baker in Nashville to make 400 pieces of this no-bake cake for me. And 4 friends delivered it to the people who were there, like when the contest was over. So I was able to leave the ingredients, and hopefully people who were able to taste that cake in Nashville were able to remember the message that went with it.
Well, and is it okay to talk about your idea? Like, I mean, I know you just brought it up, but you wanted to have that in the back of the room and mention from your speech, go ahead and get a piece, which I thought was incredible. Like that, talk about interaction, because you had us salivating. Now, he was not allowed to do that. He was not allowed to mention it. So his friend, Kathy, who's in the room with us now, she was out there handing it out. And I will confess, I had, like Pierre, more than my fair share.
That's where my piece went.
Yes, it was awesome. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. Now, legally, I understand why Toastmasters couldn't let you do it, because there's health code issues. That hotel, you probably couldn't even bring in a cookie and they would have had an alarm go off because you have to buy everything there because it's uber expensive. So in Toastmasters' defense, I get why they couldn't let you. It sucked because it was such an amazing idea, and it would have been the 11 that most people would have never been able to touch after that. So I want to, on this podcast, admire your brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Darren. And you know, you speak of the 11. That's what I was going for as well. And I even thought, if I pull this off, maybe they will change the rule book so that you're not allowed to have a prop in a different city.
I mean, that's the coolest part too, because you weren't even there, but everyone listened to what he did. He found a bakery in Nashville. He found people who were going to be in the room, stage time members who are willing to go and get it and have it and serve it. Like, I have a man crush. I'll just say that.
That is revolutionary. That's unique and definitely 11. I hate to spoil the fun, but Alexandre, help me to understand the missing ingredient as opposed to the main ingredient, and what, because I was a little unclear about that. So,
well, yeah, of course. If I answer in 2 words, maybe in 1 sentence, I didn't put much thought into the title after I finished developing the speech. This was a title that I had at the beginning of the process. And the content of the speech was slightly different, and there was a lot more emphasis on Grand-Maman who was missing, or Christiane who was missing. So when I changed the content, I didn't go back to change the title. If anybody has a suggestion for a better title, I will take it.
Nice.
Gladly.
Real quick before we let you go, Alexandre, you never know how your speech is going to touch someone. I think I've told you, I was born in France. My mother's French. She now lives in Arizona, 2,000 miles away. 3 weeks after the contest, we're in Costco. We see these French gâteaux, these cookies. Send them to Mom. 3 days later, I get a text that says, "Oh my God, these cookies are incredible. They remind me of my childhood." I got a chill and I thought, oh my God, did you see Alexandre's speech? It was incredible. I thought of you like that. So you just never know how it's going to touch someone.
And sometimes it's just the simple things, right? Grandmother's recipe. It doesn't need to be a trip to the moon or climbing Mount Everest to touch people's hearts.
So this may be self-serving, and it is, and it's also true. So Alexandre, how did Stage Time help you with that speech?
Well, quite concretely, we started, this was a speech that I had many years ago. And I brought it to Stage Time in December. Was it December 29 or 30? And this was just 3 or 4 days after my grandmother had died. So it was the first time that I shared this story with anyone after our main ingredient went missing. And it helped me to really go to the core of the message, or at least of the story, and find some really good nuggets when we were there. Mark was there, and Jennifer Leone as well. And then later on, I suppose I had at least one other coaching call with Stage Time. So you helped me with some details and about structure and everything. So I mean, I'll be honest, it's especially the semifinal speech that was developed with stage time.
Nice.
But aside from the direct coaching calls that we have, just being part of the community is not only rewarding and friendly, but they are there for our success. And going into the semifinals, we were 5 or 6 members, and we were still helping each other, even though we knew we might be on the stage together against each other, but really working with each other.
Well, we're going to take on no baked chocolate cake as the stage time traditional dessert from now on. So
awesome. I'll send you the recipe.
Thanks for trusting us. Thanks for being a part of stage time. If you're watching this or listening to this, I just put a link in the chat. If you're watching the replay on YouTube, there's probably a link below on YouTube, but darrenlive.com/TI, darrenlive.com/TI. Thank you for trusting us. Thanks for being a part of this. We're going to have to get going here. I know we've been going long, but we want to cover us. Just so proud of you. The work you put in, you nailed it. You nailed it. Congratulations.
Bien joué, Alexandre. À bientôt.
Well done.
Merci. Thanks for having me on.
Well done.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming on.
So thanks for joining us this week. Mike and Mark, thank you so much. Next week, join us, and we're going to work on critiquing the world champion of public speaking, Cyril. Mike, any thoughts from today?
Take what you learned today, take 1 or 2 ideas and apply them to your next speech. It may have come from one of us, it may have come from the chat box. That apply these, and speaking is an evolution. And the 2 you saw today, they got 2nd and 3rd place, and there's still opportunities for improvement. And you'll see that next week too, when we speak about the world champion.
Yeah, and you know, guys, what was wonderful is this. We got to see 2 of the best speakers in the Toastmasters world. One on the physical stage, one in the virtual stage. Take everything you learned from today's program and elevate your level of excellence when you present on stage or online, because we want you to be unforgettable. Darren?
Yeah, so if you're listening to this podcast, we usually don't talk about stage time all the time, but because you listen to this, if you're ready for this kind of feedback, we have step-by-step programs, world-class programs, which I didn't have when I was a Toastmaster. I wish I had them. And we do live coaching every week where you can get this kind of feedback so you can be unforgettable. Join us next week where we're going to sit down and critique the world champion of public speaking. And some of our insights might just surprise you. Join us next week. Can you see the power of this level of feedback? Can you see how it could be a game changer for your presentations? Feedback like this on your stories and your presentations. If you'd like to work with us, we got 2 options. Number 1, go right now to getaspeakingcoach.com. You'll see the whole team there and the options of working with each of us one-on-one. Or number 2, check out Stage Time. Go to the special offer mentioned in this podcast, darrenlive.com/TI. And work with us and be a part of the weekly calls where we coach our members and give them this level of feedback. So join us, whichever option works best for you, and we'll see you next week. Hey there, this is Darren. I hope you enjoyed that program and you got some great insights from watching this video podcast. Now, we don't put all of them on YouTube like you're watching now. We just put a select few. So if you want to get all the episodes, you can go right now to Apple Podcast. You can go to Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify, or check it out on your favorite platform. See if it's there for you. But we'd love to have you subscribe. Join us every single week for new content, new stories, and new strategies behind unforgettable presentations. Subscribe now.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.